Hi, this is Blockchain Bad. Welcome to another episode of the Swimove Smart Contracts Development Series. Today we're going to be looking at loop. Last time we looked at the if else statement. Today we're going to be looking at control flow and we're going to be looking at loops. Now, loops are used to execute a block of code multiple times. And there are two types of loop in Move. We have the while loop and we have the loop. So we're going to be looking at both of them in this tutorial video. So now heading over to VS Code. So just like we explained, loop is used to run a particular block of code multiple times. So now, if you don't know what a block of code means, this is what a block means. So now, any code in between this two curly brackets is a block. So now, let me give a scenario. Let me move this block here. Let's say we want to print number from 1 to 10. Now, if I want to print number, let me just say 1 to 5. If I want to print, I have to use debug, then print. Now, if I want to do debug print now, I would start to say print 1. Let me copy it again. Print 2. Print 3. I see another time consuming this is what if I want to print from 1 to 100? Is here I'll keep writing print 4 and print 5 and it goes on. You're seeing how time consuming it is. So now if I test this code out, you will see us printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is very time consuming and stressful. And it's not so efficient. What if now I want to keep printing and printing and printing for months? I cannot keep writing print statements. So now one way of doing it is to use a loop. So now in other programming language, we have for loops and while loops, but in Move we have only the while loop. We have a for loop in the Move programming language. So now let's say I want to print something. So just like I said, loops are used to run a particular block of code over and over again. So now, to write a while loop, we have to use the keyword while. Then we have to put an open and close bracket. And there has to be a condition. The loop, this block of code will continue running until a particular condition here that's in between this curly bracket is met. That's when this block of code will stop running. So now let me give a condition. Since I've counting 1 to 5, let me say, let me write a variable. Let me call it max count. And let me say my max count is 5. So now, let me put my semicolon in between here. Let me write another variable again to keep track of our counts. So let me call this one count. This will be keeping track of our counts. Let me call it 0. So now I can say the condition I'll put here, I would say if the loop should continue running, that means this block of code should continue running until count is less than max count. So now what I meant is that as long as this count here is less than the max count, this block of code will continue running. So now I can now say debug, then print. I can now print my count. So I can now print count. Let me start my count from 1 rather than the same. Let me start from 1 and let me stop at 5. So let me say until, let me just use 6, or let me just use this as an equal to. So until count is less than or equal to the max count, the block of code should continue running. So Let me run this code. It's not actually work well. I just want to show you something. So if I run this code, if you notice, we're printing one, 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 one. This one continue printing because we did not actually increment our counts. And just like I said, as long as the count is less than the mass count, this block of code will keep running. And look at it now, our counts remains one. It did not increase. That is why one continue printing until normally if it was all a smart contracts language, it will print till your system crash. But right now, Move knew that it's a timeout because you can't loop forever in smart contracts because it's not possible. On if you're using Python or JavaScript, this will run until you stop it. Maybe you have to close your terminal or your system crashes. So now what you have to do now, you have to increment our count. So now we can now come here and make our count a mutable variable because we want to change it. So now I can come here and now say count is now equal to count plus 1. Now we've implemented our count. So now if this first block of code is run, we'll print 1. Since our former count was 1 before, we'll add 1 to it. Now our net count is now going to be 2. So now if I come again and run this test, now we'll print from 1 to 5. So if you notice now, we printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and immediately the count go to 6. Because our count is no longer 5, or it's no longer less than 5, this block of code did not run again. So now that's it for while loops. So now let's head over to the flowchart of a loop. Now, looking at these flowcharts, the compiler comes here and check the condition. Just like I said, as long as a particular condition remains true, the loop will continue. That means that block of code will continue to be run. So now the compiler comes here, it check a particular condition. Is the condition true? Yes. It comes down, it runs the block of code. It goes back up again and check. If that condition is true, that's how that block of code will continue to run until it comes here and check. Okay, fine. Is the condition now false? Yes. If the condition is false, it breaks out of the loop. It doesn't run that block of code and it ends the code. So here's the flowchart of a loop. So now, apart from loops again, we have the infinite loops. So now, if you want a particular block of code to run forever, I can just come here, I'll just change it to true. Now, this is an infinite loop, but it's almost impossible to have an infinite loop in smart contract language like in programming language. If it was Python, JavaScript, you can have an infinite loop. That just like I said, your computer will crash or until you kill terminal. But at one point in new programming language, it's going to stop. You can't have an infinite loop. So an infinite loop, it's when you come here and make this true. That means this condition is always true. And that means that this block of code will continue to be run. So let me head over here and run this code. Now, if you notice, we're counting like infinitely. We're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, because this is an infinite loop. Because this condition is always true. So we'll keep on counting till, if it was that's like I said, there's other programming languages till your system crashes or kill your terminal. But we would not let you do that infinitely. So our last statement I want to introduce to you is the break statement. So now the break statement is used to break out of a loop. So now it's used to break up a loop with a particular condition. So now instead of me using the former condition of like just like I did before, that I said you should count as long as counts is less than max, less than or equal to max counts, it should continue counting. Let me just copy this. So instead of using this now, I can choose to use an infinite loop and break out of it an if statement. So now using an infinite loop now, I can come here and say if count is greater than max count. Now can say break. I can now use the break statement to break out of the loop. So let me bring this code down here. I have to put a semicolon after my if statement. So now let me run this test. So if you notice, we're printing 1 to 6. So what's happening here? Now it seems we have to put our increments before the if statement, because what happens here, because it's counted 6, it's not break out of the loop, it had to print it before incrementing it to 7. So let's do that again. Now it will actually count from 1 to 5. Now this is the break segment. It is used to break out of a loop, mostly an infinity loop, but you just used to break out of a loop. So let me show you the flowcharts of a break statement. So if you look at this flowchart, we started it. We looked at the loop condition, which our scenario, it was always true. So since it was always true, it checked. Since it's always true, it checks the loops begin. It looks at the break condition. Going back to our code, it looked at it. Is count greater than max count? If it is true, if it is greater than the max count, it breaks the loop. And now coming back here again, let's say if it was not greater than, let's say our count was 4, it was not up to 5. It will check, is our count greater than the max count? No, false. It will go back again. It can run other codes, go back and go and start the loop again. Now starting the loop again, is our condition always met? This time now we are using an infinite loop, so it is always be true. But let's say we have a lack condition, our loop was a lack condition, and check, is that condition still met? If it was false, it will break out of the loop. So this is the flow chart of a break statement. Look at it clearly, it is not so hard. First of all, we have the loop condition. If it is true, it continues. If it is false, it breaks out of the loop. Now we have a condition again, just like our if statement here, to break out of the loop. Now it checks for that condition. Is it true? If it's true, it breaks out. If it false, it goes back against the beginning of the loop and keeps running the loop. So going back to our VS codes, just like I told you in the move book, we have the while statements and we have the loop. So now let's say I don't want to always use while true. I'm not sure of my condition, just like an infinite loop. I can just use the keyword loop. Then let me just copy what is here in this block of code and paste it here, and let me just comment this out. So if you notice, it will do the same thing. So most times in move, you mostly see people use while loop. You hardly see them. You hardly see codes with loop. But instead of me coming here to say while true, I can just use the keyword loop. So it is not much different from the while loop. They are used interchangeably. You can't use anyone you like, but most times you find yourself using the while loop. So another kind of statement we have again, let me just comment this out. We don't mostly use this. I'll just want to show it to you. So another kind of statements we have again is the continue statement. So now, if you want to, let's say, print all numbers from 1 to 5, but you want to skip a particular number. So the continue statement is used to skip a block of code below it. So now, let me give a scenario. Let's say now, as you're printing numbers now, let me bring this print statement down here. And let me also bring this increment down here. So now, let's say as I was printing, I want to print all numbers from 1 to 5. Let me make use of this other one. Now, let's say I want to print numbers from 1 to 5, but I want to skip 3. I can come and say if count is equal to 3. I would now use the continue statement. Continue. I will now use the continue statement to skip the rest of the code. So now, what the break statement does is that once it meets this code, it breaks out of the loop. But for the continue statement, once it meets the continue, it continues and goes to the next loop. Like what I mean is that it will no longer run this block of code. For the break statement, it just stops and breaks the loop, and if the loop does not work again, it doesn't run the rest of the code below. But for the continue statement, it just keeps the rest of the code below the block, the if block, and goes to the next loop. So let me show what I'm talking about. So while count is equal to 3, let me still increment again. Let me say count is equal to count plus some things to increment. So let me increment again and let me run this code. If you look at it now, we'll skip 3. We're going from 1 to 4, 5 and skip 3. Actually, let me example with that. Sorry, I made a mistake here. I was supposed to put this count below the print statement. So let me run the test again. So if you look at it now, we printed 1, 2, 4, 5, but we skipped 3. Why? Because we use this continue statement. This continue statement is used to skip a loop, like it's used to skip a loop. So now using continue statement, just like I said, using this continue statement, you actually skip the other codes below the continue statement and go over to the next loop. So let me head over to the flow charts of continue. So if you look at it now, first of all, the starting, we have our loop condition, which was here. These are our loop condition, which we checked. So now, if that is true, it goes to the next one, which is our skip condition, which was this. This is our skip condition. So now it checks, is count equal to 3? If true, it goes up and loops. Now, coming back here again, we have our loop condition. If our loop condition is not met, it stops the program. Now, for the loop again, it checks our loop condition. Is it true? Is our loop condition true? If it's true, just like I said before, it's like if it was true, it will skip that the other block of the code, like you skip so that block of code and go to the next loop. But if it is false, it will run, it will do something. So now this is the other do something. This is the other block of code it needs to run. So it will run this code and go over to the next loop. So just take a look at the flow charts of the continue statements. So it's not so complex. It's very easy. If you don't understand, I advise you go back and watch the video again. Try to practice with it. There are a whole lot of things we could do with the loops, the break statement, the continue statement interchangeably. So that's it for loops and control flow. If you have any question, you can drop it in the comment section. Feel free to DM me if you want to. My handles are at the YouTube page. So see you in the next video. Thank you very much.